Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here this morning on this wonderful topic. You know, I wasn't preparing for this, but Jared just mentioned Thomas Hobbes, and it just kind of triggered a memory. I don't know if there's political science majors here. Many of you probably have heard of Thomas Hobbes. He wrote Leviathan, is that right? So he is, 16th century, 17th century British. Okay, so he has this famous quote, and I think this is really good to juxtapose his famous quote with what we're going to get into today. And his famous quote is that human life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. You get that? Terrible, right? Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. I may be wrong, but I think that's a quote. And you can correct me if I'm wrong later. So let's just go with that. Okay, I'm completely realigning my opening word now because of this, because of Thomas Hobbes. So this is a view of human life, characterized by these 5 words. Well, from one perspective, that very much can be the tombstone of people. This is how your life is. Life is solitary, it's poor, it's a tough life. Well, what we have been covering is an entirely different kind of life in these past few weeks. And we've been touching the general subject, the glorious church. And the glorious church brings you into a life that is entirely the opposite of a Hobbesian life. It's not solitary, but it's corporate. It's not poor, but it's rich. It's not nasty, but sweet. It's not brutish, but it's, what would you say? Very fine, right? And it's not short, but it's eternal. I like that down. It's not solitary, but corporate. Not poor, but rich. Not nasty, but sweet. Amen. I like that. Not brutish, but fine. You know, fine being like sensitive, not hypersensitive, but very keen. And short being versus eternal. This is a distinction. You pick. What kind of life do you want? Your choice. So this is a wonderful topic we've been covering with regards to the church, and what our burden is. We don't want to just touch your minds. We want to touch your hearts. And so week after week, we are presenting different aspects of the church, not to educate you, but to kindle within you a love for the church. Because Christ loves the church. And that's the first verse we have here. Let's read this all together. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. Christ loves the church. If you were to ask Christ what is on his heart, if you were to peer into it, it is the church. He gave himself up for the church. And even we should have the prayer, Lord, cause me to love the church, even as you love the church. So we'd like to touch your hearts in the same way that Christ, his heart, is entirely on the church. And there's another verse here, the second verse. Let's read that all together. Matthew 13, 45 and 46. Ready, go.
Again, the kingdom of the heavens is like a merchant seeking fine pearls, and finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it.
So we don't have the time to fully break that down, but this is a parable talking about how the Lord is a merchant, and he's seeking fine pearls. He found one pearl of great value. He went and sold all that he had and bought it. This is a parable speaking of Christ's determination to find something of great value. And what was that thing? What is that pearl? That is the church. And when he went it, he sold all that he had. This shows you how much the church is on his heart. Is there anything on this earth that you would sell all of your possessions to buy? I mean, can you fathom such a thing? And listen, it's not like Christ is a poor man. He has all the riches. But he found this one pearl of great value. And he said, I'm going to sell all to buy that pearl. That is his determination, his heart for the church. So we start with this perspective, brothers and sisters, that the church is so valuable. And we just hope that over the course of this semester, all of us would have this feeling, Lord, I want to give my all for the church. And we concluded, weren't you touched by that hymn we sang? In stanza 4, it concludes with these 4 lines. Since for me you gave your all, everything I lay aside. For your church my all I give, that you would be satisfied. Amen. So that's a general theme that we're covering. I want to take a quick 30 seconds and just review. We've been covering some pretty profound topics. We saw in week 1 that the church is the mystery hidden within God's heart. And then in week 2 we saw Eve as a type of the church. And then last week we had an awesome word on the church being the house of God. That is God's resting place, or God's dwelling place. And as we considered how to go on this week, we felt we needed to linger on this matter of the church being the house of God, but taking it from another, a little bit of a different angle. Last week, our brother Alexi emphasized the church being a resting place for God. This week, our emphasis is on the church as our resting place, as our family. So let's read the title all together, right under message 4. Ready? Go.
The church as a household of God, where the living God dwells.
Amen. Okay, so the key verse for this week, well, let me explain how I'm going to present this. I like to present something of the household of God, that is the family of God, and then something related to the living God, and then we'll conclude with a picture in the New Testament of what this looks like. So this first part of the message this morning is on the church being the household of God. There's a difference. Last week we talked about the church being the house of God, but this week we're talking about the household. What's the difference between the house and the household? The house is your physical property, but the household refers to the people there. Right? You know, last year when you were filling out the 2010 census, they say, how many people, tell us about your household. And you say, oh, my wife and children and all the people living there. It's the people. Well, the church is not only the house of God, but it is the household of God. Meaning it is the people. So let's read the 3rd verse on your sheet, Ephesians 2:19. Ready? Go.
So then you are no longer strangers and sojourners, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God.
So the key phrase is members of the household of God. And, you know, brothers and sisters, what we've been touching in previous weeks is very profound. It's almost hard to enter into it in a sense. It's so astounding. What we're covering this week, I would say, is not necessarily profound, but it's very sweet and it's very experiential. And that is, it's almost too simple, but I'd like to impress you with this, that the church as the household of God is the family of God. Amen. Aren't you glad you're in God's family? Amen.